Because it always have two people standing. So they can see people know which way to go, but they're not supposed to be walking up and down. Okay, now you can come back on. 2 minutes, that's when we're fast. Yeah, they got something in a minute.
We're starting up here.
Nice to meet you on the total of the Schomberg Center.
Yeah, bring us in.
Great. Our first panel, 40 years of African American publisher, is welcome our orator. The first one is Brainchild. This entire weekend is the founder of QBR, the founder of Harlem Book Fair, Mr. Max Rodriguez.
Thank you and welcome to the 10th Annual Harlem Book Fair. Our conversation this morning is about black publishing, 40 years of black publishing. Actually, in aggregate, these publishers have a total of over 120 years of experience in telling our stories, working under the radar, working in publishing before it was all the vogue. To my immediate right is Tony Rose, publisher of Amber Books, Amber Book Communications Group. To his right is Paul Coates, Black Classic Press. To his right is Wade Hudson of Just Us Books and his wife and partner, Cheryl Willis Hudson, and Kassahun Checole, the publisher of Africa World Press and Red Sea Press. And what we want to do this morning is just talk about what publishing is, what it represents for us as a community, what has been its triumphs and travails, and just the conversation about urban fiction, because it seems to have taken so much of the publishing space for us. In fact, it has gone a long way in almost branding the community. And some feel that there is an imbalance there that is either cyclical or should be in some way balanced now. So we want to talk about their experiences and what you see as the future of black publishing, especially given the fact that one thing that we know is that the majors, the larger publishers, often use the smaller independents, sort of their farm club. They look to see who's doing well, they track the numbers, they make offers, and more often than not, they're offers that can't be refused. How does that impact you? How does that impact your viability as publishers and the continuation of your work as publishers? Who'd like to begin in that conversation?
Max, I'd like to begin the conversation, if you will, and with the permission. These guys are nodding their head, but I'm really looking at Cheryl.
Go right ahead, Paul.
Seriously, I want to begin with contextualizing the premise of 40 years of black publishing, first of all. I beg your pardon? I want to begin by contextualizing the premise of 40 years of black publishing. And I want to contextualize it because it's wonderful to celebrate the contributions of these publishers who are here today. But our conversation always has to be a conversation that extends beyond the here and now and extends back and constantly gives tribute to those whose shoulders we stand on. So I want to just bring our 40 years into the context of a history in this country, publishing history in this country, that began in resistance, that in many ways continues, and the 40 years we're looking at here is a reflection of the resistance that we've had to oppression, second-class citizenship, enslavement in this country. Our earliest publishers, going back to folks like David Walker in the early 1820s, recognized the need for us as a people to have a voice that was free and independent and clearly spoke for ourselves, and they depended on books, pamphlet, news journals, and whatever way they could get into press to do that. This 40 years that we're talking about, and there's a whole, I don't want to slight anyone, people like Frederick Douglass, our whole history, our whole tradition of slave narratives, when we talk about black publishing, we have to include that. And when we look at this 40 years of black publishing, this 40 years really stands on the shoulders of that tradition. In fact, the folks that we're celebrating here on this panel are the survivors out of the most recent phase of that, because so many black publishers came forward who are no longer around. When we look, the publisher that's not here today is Hakeem Mahadabuti, and he in fact would have been who we would have celebrated as 41 years of black publishing. He's not here, but even before Hakeem, there's a long stream of black publishers having roots. Certainly, many of them having roots right here in Harlem. Whether you know, one of my favorites is J. Rogers, who is based here in Harlem and who sold books for many years and never could get a major publisher to touch one of his books until after he died. John Henry Clark did that. But that's the tradition that these publishers, when we talk about 40 years, emerges out of. And any conversation that we have going forward, any conversation that we have about what's coming next or what the state of black publishing is, should be referenced onto that. We need to look at this 40 years as being a small chapter, really a small chapter in our publishing and our tradition of support for black publishing. Because we don't have a publishing history, we don't have a publishing tradition without, in fact, the black community, because the black community has always supported us, and we hope that you will continue to do that. Thank you. So that's my 2 cents to start it off.
Yeah, Paul, I second what you've just said. It is so important that we recognize those who came before us, and we do stand on their shoulders. The first editorial for Freedom Journal, in fact, said that we wish to plead our own cause because too long others have spoken for us, and that's what we are trying to do as publishers, give voice to those who do not have a voice. And I think that
I'm sorry, wait, excuse me 1 second. I would like to make request of the audience that we not use flash while we are videotaping. Thank you so much.
And I think you cannot really recognize us without recognizing those who came before us, the Frederick Douglasses and the J.A. Rogers and the Langston Hughes. Those people who, many of them self-published, and they took their published works to the community, to Harlem and 2 different places around the country. And we cannot really talk about, as Paul said, our history, our tradition of publishing without recognizing those. But that having been said, I think we also need to recognize the efforts of Paul Coates and the efforts of Hakeem Mahadabuti in terms of carrying on, and Kassahun, Checole, and Tony Rose, of carrying on that tradition, because we are constantly bombarded with things that will try to stop us from carrying on that tradition. And we do need the support of the black community to help us continue to be important, not just publishing books, but important players in helping us identify and recognizing the issues and the concerns that we as a community must deal with. And,
if I can,
and that's my 2 cents.
Let me add mine in here. Last night when we were at the Phyllis Wheatley Awards, which was wonderful, Max, a very important award here at the Harlem Book Fair, which is a phenomenon in the country and in the world. It mentioned that over in 200 years of, which in my estimation, 200, maybe 50, 225 years of publishing in America, that African Americans did not read or buy books, which is a very false statement because that's all we do is write and read and have been for the last 200 years and more in America. We self-published our plight all through the 19th century, from Frederick Douglass's memoirs to memoirs by just about everybody that had something to say about that, right up to W.B. Du Bois. And in my estimation, I mean, we've been here in America for a long time, writing, searching, reading, trying to understand who we are here and what America is about and what it means for us. My grandmother was a fervent follower of John Johnson of Ebony Magazine and Johnson Publications fame. And she said, we must always support Mr. Johnson. We must always subscribe to Ebony Magazine. And when she passed, one of the things and treasures that I found when I cleaned out her house was a massive amount of Negro Digest books going back from 1940 to 1945. Through the years, I would say about 18 years now, or maybe longer, over 20 years since I found them, I have been giving them out to certain individuals. I think I gave one to you, Max, a few years ago. And they're treasures. The Negro Digest, Ebony Magazine, the book publishing work that we've done in America, all of us going back, and as I said, 200, 100 years, magazine publishing. We search and give back our stories, our lives, our lifestyles, our history. In fact, Johnson Publications to me is the modern day bastion of our history, as is where you're sitting in, as is W.Paul quotes there last night, the bastion of our history, the place, the founding of our history in this massive building of 2,500 African-American books written for and about us right here in this building. Take a tour. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So I have a question about children's book publishing, and there is no Black Harry Potter. I'd like to know why, or at least why you think that such a phenomena has not existed emanating from a Black cultural experience.
I think that we have to look at the history of our struggle and the history of the development of fantasy and go back to the legacy of our roots in terms of creating the kind of reality in a children's literature that would sort of reflect what Harry Potter does. It's all Harry Potter is based on mythology and a modern telling of fantasy story and tales. And in terms of the development of children's literature, we really need to know what the canon is. We need to develop more writers. And I think that there are people who have written and are writing who have the power and imagery of the phenomena called Harry Potter. Virginia Hamilton, for example, was a fabulous writer. She's now passed on, but she wrote Many Thousand Gone and The Planet of Junior Brown and wonderful, wonderful books that may not be in the public eye. I think it's important to remember that literature exists whether you have a marketing strand or not. And part of the phenomena of Harry Potter is the marketing. It's not the literature itself, if I may say so. And I think Harry Potter is the series and the writing, at least in the first volume, was wonderful and had flights of fantasy. But I think we do. It's a matter of access, and it's a matter of finding the stories that reach larger audiences and that have marketing dollars behind them to drive those numbers.
Cheryl, would you mind if I develop that just a bit more here in terms of the crossover effect of a Harry Potter, which means that whenever I saw Harry Potter commercials or news situations on Harry Potter, there was always African-American children involved in that phenomenon, and along with the European-American community, the African-American community, the Asian-American community, Native American community. So what you're talking about is probably a situation of a crossover situation coming from a Just Us Books that massively entails all of America's cultural aspects.
Yeah, and I think the important point, though, that Cheryl made is marketing.
Yeah.
Scholastic put a lot of money
Millions.
behind that book. So these kinds of successes don't just happen
Right.
by accident. Every once in a while, a book will take off on its own, but Harry Potter had, a lot of money behind it and a lot of marketing strategy. It was a well-written book and interesting and engaging characters, so kids were hooked by it, but I think marketing accounts for a large share of why it was so successful.
And I think that, if I could add, I think that we need to kind of define ourselves, continue to define ourselves. I don't know that Just Us Books wants to publish a Harry Potter per se. I think that we need to continue to reflect and think about what stories we need to tell. And that's, people point to Harry Potter because it's a commercial success, and we
Right.
would love to have that commercial
Yeah,
success.
yeah.
But our primary aim as publishers of Black books for children is to tell our stories, to have Black children see themselves in books. And that, to a large extent, is something that has only happened in the last 40 years. Before 1960, before the mid-1960s, you would very, very seldom find one Black child in a book, and that Black child may have been marginalized. So part of what our mission is to bring wonderful stories about the diversity of African American experiences to children, for children, so children can see themselves and see the possibilities that they have and develop those in terms of what our heritage is and will be.
Remarks, in terms of contextualizing our story, where Paul quote started, it's very important to tie up the two items here. That is, telling our story and the marketing of our story.
Right,
And the
right.
most important aspect in our history of development of publishing in the African American context is the role that African American booksellers played. The booksellers played the role of a publisher, by and large. Yeah? If you come to the 1970s in Harlem itself, you go at Mr. Michel's bookstore in 125th Street, or Liberation Bookstore, or you go to California to a Korean bookstore, all those stores that actually played a role of not only a bookseller, but also a publisher, with a message, with a mission, specifically saying, these are the stories that we need to tell, these are the stories that we need to read and reach out. So they have been the backbone of our existence, by and large. Black bookstores
Right.
have been the critical backbone of our existence. So it's very critical to tie up the two. That's where the money issue comes in. We don't have the resources
That's exactly
to
right,
do the
yeah.
kind of marketing that we're talking about right now. But we do have access to our community, which others do not have. Okay, our churches, our organizations, our communities are served by our own booksellers, out on the streets and in the bookstores.
And how has consolidation impacted your access to market? Or what have you created in space of consolidation?
Consolidate, what do you mean?
Well,
Max?
consolidate, the mega stores, the shrinking of the Black bookstores, the viability of the bookstores.
You were asking what our alternatives are? in
Yes,
the
what have you,
shrinking of
so the market
African-American
has been impacted.
bookstores.
We have fewer Black booksellers. Given that Black booksellers are integral to marketing your stories, what do you do in response to
We've all
that?
set up wonderful websites.
Max, your question is a question that Kassahun's answer was right on point in terms of how Black bookstores have been a backbone to Black publishers. But the question you asked really is a question of how books are being published in this country and literally around the world now. It's a question that really opens the door to how information is processed, how information is packaged and sold, because the consolidation or the elimination, really, of independent bookstores, white independent bookstores and Black independent bookstores in this country, has affected all publishers. Certainly they have affected our Black publishers, but they've affected the major publishers as well. When I say majors, I'm talking about publishers who have larger resources. So what we're talking about is a question of how people get their information, how people buy their information, the access to information, and how it's shifted, period. Not just with black bookstores. With black bookstores, I mean, the impact, of course, has been devastating. It's been devastating all around, though, not to short shrift our black booksellers. What we have done is been at the effect of it. In other words, we haven't been at the center and the leading edge of trying to steer this thing. But I have to say, and that's not a criticism really so much of black books publishers, so much as it is a criticism, period, of people who are producing information in this country right now. All publishers are at the effect of a shrinking marketplace. They're at the effect of consolidation. There are things that black book publishers have done, but white book publishers have done them also. Whether it's taking advantage of the internet, as Tony has said, or whether it is a matter of piling up to that art villain Amazon, who delivers us all a paycheck, and when it comes, we're happy to get it. You know, it's one of those things. But we've had to sidle up basically to technology, which is forcing the change itself. But it's an industry-wide issue that we're looking at here, and not just one that's impacting on us, although it's had devastating impact on our community.
See, Max, a publisher is a marketer. Publisher is a publicist. A publisher is a publicist. It's an all-encompassing media situation. You have to be multitasked, understand the variations of national, international promotion, understand your relevance in your books that you're publishing to your market, who you're marketing to. I mean, for instance, this is C-SPAN. It's publicized as 15 million people. Here we are. And I had www.amberbooks.com sitting here. So that's a marketing tool for me, although I can't publicize it right now on C-SPAN, but it is www.amberbooks.com.
That was not subtle. Okay. Kassahun, tell us
But
about
that's
your
how we
work.
do it.
Yes, I got it. Tell us about your publishing effort, Kassahun, because you publish Africa World Press and you distribute through Red Sea Press. Can you tell us more about your work and who you market to?
Well, Africa World Press, as you know, has been in existence for 25 years right now. It came from the experience that I, as an individual and an activist in this community, learned the need for us to have our voices heard and the need to have our voices spread as much as possible. When I started the publishing house, there was very little publishing going on in regard to Africa as a whole. The big publishing houses would do 1 or 2 books, and they would do them well. They would promote them, and they would kill them, essentially, once they are taking the maximum out of it. The issue was how to create a publishing house that sustains long-term academic publishing on Africa. And that I saw as a challenge. And that challenge I took on from learning from other experiences, particularly the experiences of places like Mexico, where people for years now, since the 1933 revolution, have been telling their own story through their own language, through their own publishing houses. And that has tremendous amount of impact upon the people of Mexico themselves. So the question is, in parallel sense, what is the impact of that kind of contribution to our own communities? Africa, African American, what have you? None. We have not done enough to get out the word, the story that we need to tell, particularly to be told by our own people, by people who can write in our community, by people who can think in our community. And we have plenty of them. It's not the quantity that's lacking, it is the outlet that is lacking. So in that sense, we've played a significant role in trying to bring in newer, younger, and also older authors who have a story to tell and bring it out to the community. We did the traditional from. We're going out on the street selling our books to dealing with the traditional bookstores. We went to Barnes & Noble and Borders. We delivered our books. They said, well, the books look good, but who's going to read them? Black people don't come to our stores to read these books. So we have to look for an alternative way, create our own distribution network, and go to our own communities. And that's why I came back in the beginning to say the backbone of our distribution has been the black community stores. the churches, the organizations in the black community. Those are that we have to reach out and create an alternative way of getting our books out to the public.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, let me just add a couple of points. You're so right, Kassahun, because we have gone a couple of times through the route of using distributors to get our books into the marketplace. And both times we tried that, it really did not work. So we know that the best way for us to get our books into the community, into the hands of those folks who will buy them, is for us to handle our own distribution. We do a number of different sales events. We go to churches. We partnership with organizations, sororities and fraternities. We probably do, Cheryl, what, about 40 or 50 conferences a year. And we sell a lot of books that way. We make a lot of contacts that way, you know, and we have an online store. I'm not going to give out the I'm messing with you,
I
Tony.
can do it again.
We have an online store as well. So you really have to look for as many options to get your books into the hands of those folks who will buy them as you can. And you have to really be resourceful. You have to be creative. You have to look for opportunities where there sometimes may not seem to be opportunities to sell your books. But again, as just to reiterate what Kassahun has said, you know, the black community has been the backbone of our publishing efforts.
And it is. You have to use, what my thought always was we didn't own enough television stations where we could broadcast our information, our books. One of the things that we tried to do on the Black Family Channel when it was there was set up our own TV show, Literary Living, which in the 6 months that it was on air was a phenomenon. We created a show that we got thousands of letters. We sold, of course, we had our own commercial, AmberBooks.com commercial running, and we sold a lot of books through our website like that, and people saw the show, and we did a lot of authors on there. A lot of authors came on the show and wanted to come in. And in fact, by the time the Black Family Channel went out of business, it was their most successful show on air, was Literary Living, hosted by Heather Covington. So my thought always is that we need more TV. TV is the wonderland of America. Everybody, it's the cheapest form of entertainment in this country is television. And of course, who has always supported publishing and our entrepreneurial efforts in America has been black radio. And where black radio can get hundreds of thousands of people within their community. And of course, with the conglomeration and the efforts of combining, you got a Tom Joyner morning show reaching millions, but still television can reach millions of people at one time. So TV is the the thing that we always try to go for.
And how about a conversation about in the space of laissez-faire, of open business, black writers write, self-publishers, authors become successful. They quickly and often are brought under a larger publishing effort. Is there any sense of you would want those publishers to come through you at least first before, or to come back after they have created their success through the support, that marketing support that a larger publisher might give them?
We've done both. We've had a large publisher come to us and sign our company, which was John Wiley and Sons, for that. And then in turn, we took from larger companies some of our authors. Jesse Brown comes to mind, who was with Hyperion, and Alfred Fournet, who did our massive makeup and skincare books from Simon & Schuster. So we did the reverse and then did the frontal, both. And you can do both. You can go to In fact, I've talked to some major authors. They're very unsatisfied with some of their publishers. They don't work for them in terms of in some ways. In some ways they want. One lady, in fact, here at the Harlem Book Fair that I was talking to earlier today said that she was released from, and I won't say the company, because she wouldn't put more sex in her books. But this is a very well-known author, heavily promoted, and is available to those of us or those companies who do fiction, and good fiction. I'm not talking urban fiction, fiction. She stuck to her rule of thumb and did not include too much sex, and they released her. So she's available.
Paul, you've worked closely with Walter Mosley in publishing one or two of his books. Although Walter might be the better to answer this question, what do you think he gained and what do you think he gave in moving from a major publisher to work with you?
You know, again, like you said, Walter probably is the best to answer that. One of the things that I gained, though, I gained the relationship of a tremendous black man. And that has had more fulfilling value to me than any amount of money, any amount of funds could ever have. I think what Walter gained and what he gets from it is what he said he always wanted. He wanted a relationship that he could continue writing successfully and at the same time bring something back to our community that enriches our community. At the same time, provide an outlet for his work. Because Walter did not undertake this project as a project, he tells people all the time, he didn't undertake it as a project of benevolence, like best-selling author publishing with a small black publishing company. He saw it as a give and a take. On the one hand, he could give something, and on the other hand, he could contribute to strengthen an industry that would continue to publish his books long after other publishers perhaps rejected him. And so he saw it as a strategic move and a move that other writers could possibly make, which goes back to your question, Max, about whether or not writers should go with larger publishers and things like that. The fact of the matter, as Kassahun said earlier, with the exception of this beautiful lady here, these other guys don't have any money. And they certainly, I mean, we could put our nickels together, but we're not going to win too many contracts, with resources. I know Tony has a lot of money, But the truth of the matter is, these major companies are major companies because they have major resources. Right. And when they drop $500,000 on the table, they drop $1 million on the table, it's not something you can sneeze at, nor is it something I would ever tell a writer to sneeze at. I tell them to take the money and run. But don't abandon your community. We had the experience with Walter Mosley, I do want to add, one of the people that was very, very critical, even after having the success with Walter, we had a period in which we were basically broke. I mean, really, really broke. Not broke like we are today, but really, really broke. And one of the writers that brought us a book at that time was becoming a prominent writer and has gone on to become one, and we will always owe her a debt, and that's Kim Roby, who published with us a book that wasn't our traditional book, but published with us a book that was popular enough that allowed us to make money and continue on. She knew exactly what she was doing. There wasn't a market at that time to publish it with any of the major publishers, but she did see that she could bring this book back to a black publishing company, make a contribution, and make some money. And that's what Walter has done as well. We've published the books, we've made money, they've made money, and at the same time, we've strengthened a publishing community so we can continue to deliver books.
And I'm sorry, please.
I think for children's publishing, it's a little bit different because traditionally children's book publishing does not offer huge advances. Children's book publishing is sort of a stepchild of the publishing industry at large. But we find that our authors stay with us and authors come back to us, and there are lots of people that want to be published by Just Us Books because the reputation that we have for the care and feeding of the author and the respect that we have for the story and the respect that we have for children. So we know that we put a good book together and people want to be published by Just Us Books. What we're doing now as we move from Alphabets 1, 2, 3, ABC, and we're building on building blocks of literacy so that our readership grows with us from alphabets to picture books to biographies, storybooks, and now books for young adults. Most recently, Omar Tyree, who is a well-known adult author, actually came together with us because he wanted to write something really good for children, and he has a wonderful manuscript which will become a book and which will be available this fall called 12 Brown Boys. And this is to speak to the issue of literacy and the myth that black boys don't read, and also the reality that we've got to capture the attention and readership of black boys. So it's a two-way street as well. We can provide really good services and guidance and direction for people who may want to go into children's book publishing who don't have that experience, and it's a two-way street in that regard.
Yeah. One thing I will add to this is that authors do not necessarily go for the money. I think, although money is a critical issue for many of them, I think in many ways, if you look at our history, the five of us here alone, not only other people, we have not been around long enough to create the kinds of credibility that most authors look for. So our challenge is how long can we sustain ourselves, and how long can we become more professional, more effective, more credible, so the authors say, well, money is one issue, but I also want a quality product.
Yes.
Right.
I also want to reach the community. And who can do that? Then you have a selection between money and the outreach and the credibility. So our sustainability in the long term defines the kind of authors that we're going to be able to attract.
What we found also is that we've nurtured our authors. It's one in particular author of ours is Jake Brown, who through our Colossus Books entity of musical, which comes from our music background, and understand whether it's the Destiny's Child books that we did, and the 50 Cent books, and Jay-Z and things like that. Jake Brown has gone on to become massive in other areas of music and script writing, Hollywood now, and he's still with us. He's still contracted. He's still, we just did the Red Hot Chili Peppers with him. So we've kind of branched into modern pop areas with some of our books, which we began with Dr. Dre and have been moving into that area, eventually into film, we're hoping, and taking some of those products. And then I've got a book coming before the legend, The Rise of New Kids on the Block this year, which is they're coming back out, and it's part of my background, and a guy named Maurice Starr. So we're doing that, and we're hoping that sees results. And we did a script, actually, with one of our books on Destiny's Child that is being shot. So, I mean, we've nurtured our authors so that we can move into other areas with them. And as I see Wade doing with his children authors, and it's very progressive.
Yeah, and the other point too, Max, is that most books don't really make money. You know, there are thousands and thousands of books that are published every year in the adult market and the children's market, and most of those books, few of them break even, or even fewer are successful and make money. But I think what many authors want to see is that their book, their books that they write, is available, and that if someone wants to buy the book, they can purchase the book. And that's why we started an imprint called Sankofa Books. And the purpose of that imprint is to pick up those books that major publishers have dropped by wonderful authors. I mean, really important works. I mean, pretty much what what Paul did with Black Classic Press in the beginning, although he was looking for obscure books. But there are a lot of wonderful books that have been published in the children's arena over the last 25, 30 years that are no longer available. They've been dropped by major publishers. So we've picked up a number of books.
Wait, didn't you get the books from Wiley? What's the author, James?
Not from well, Jim Haskins. We picked up 4 of his books.
Right.
Yeah,
That was a feat.
brought
He's a
those. In
great
fact,
author.
Jim Haskins,
Right.
he's now deceased, but Jim Haskins, I guess he must have written over several hundred books. I mean, a
Right.
prolific author.
Prolific.
And a vast majority of those books were no longer in print. He had gotten the rights back to them. And he was looking to get those books back in print so that they will be available. We picked up 4 of his books. We also picked up 4 of Rosa Gee's books.
Right.
You know.
Fantastic writer.
Yeah,
Rosa
excellent
Gee.
writer. You know, Eleanor Tate. We picked up 3 of her books, right? And there are tons of wonderful, important work that is no longer available. You know, and so what we do in that area is important also, in addition to finding new work, because it's in the publishing industry. It really is all about money for most companies, and we are not in the business of publishing only, and I think I said this last night, to make money. You know, we want to make money. We're not saying we're not trying to make money, but that's not the only reason that we are doing what we do.
So you have Sankofa and you also have Marimba.
Marimba is a collaboration or a partnership that we struck with Kensington Publishing, and that particular imprint is focusing on producing multicultural titles. We don't really see it competing at all with Just Us Books' mission. It's another opportunity for us to enhance and enlarge what we do at Just Us Books. And it's another way of finding other opportunities that can really help to grow our own company. We own 50% of that partnership, and it seems to be working well. We launch this fall with 8 books, actually, and so we'll see where it goes. But our, you know, that particular venture is important to us, but Just Us Books is what we're all about, and we will always be about Just Us Books.
Right.
And urban fiction. Just a quick conversation about urban fiction. Some say it stereotypes, some says it generates a new readership, and both may be true. Impact of urban fiction on the conversation about African American books? Any comments? Good, bad, indifferent?
I have a lot of mixed feelings on it because of my background, coming from projects and, you know, all that, and poor background. And I always think that whether it's books or music relating to a negative situation, meaning the degradation of ourselves, self-demeaning of ourselves through pictures or words or music, and thrown at our community, usually we start, you know, as you began the conversation, with an independent mind, and usually the most negative, which was why when we got to deal with Wiley, when we looked and saw, well, they publish self-help books also, and positive books, but a lot of corporations, whether it's in the music business or the book business, will jump on that and flood our communities with that negative value of ourselves. And by doing that, it's a demeaning situation. It becomes an overwrought overabundance, and certainly a situation where, you know, our children are impacted totally, whether it's by negative videos on television or negative books they see people reading, or in the stores, and they look at the covers, and pimpdom is good, and being a gangster is just wonderful, and being a thug is just the greatest thing in the world, and oh, we can go to jail too, and that's a great place, and jail is wonderful, and you know, we got 2.5 million African American men and women in jail, and we got 5 million grandmothers taking care of grandchildren becoming the parent. We got 8 million single parents, and our communities, are disheveled in the poorer communities where I come from, and so I'm always looking at that as not a great situation. And as far as saying, well, at least we're reading, or at least we're listening to music, which is, as we stated when we first began, is a fallacy. We've always read, and we've always read great literature. We've had great authors, Richard Wright and on up and down, and great literature to read. So it's not, I think it's just a way of making money and empowerment, and it's like selling a crack dealer on the street to me. Who's, his goal is not to, because he's poor, actually he becomes a powerful fixture in his community once he's enslaved and addicted everybody and made everybody a zombie. So you got people now just reading it because it's the thing to read, and it's not a good or bad thing. It's a negative thing.
I sort of disagree. With children's book, if I may, with children's books and Just Us books, our mission is to really provide positive images. And I believe in the First Amendment and free speech, and I believe that everyone has a right to tell their own story. I just think that the impact that some of the street lit and urban fiction has on teenagers and then trickling down to younger kids is negative, and it's not good, because it makes for a situation where there are not options. Our children come from all kinds of backgrounds. I came from a background in Portsmouth, Virginia, middle class. My father sold insurance. My mother was a teacher in the public school. The street life was something that I was not familiar with. I knew, life and thought everybody lived like they lived in Ebony magazine, with furniture and white rugs and whatever on the floor. But it's all about options for children, and I think to provide a safe haven, a place where each one teaches one, where a parent is the first teacher, where you can catch a parent or an adult reading something good to their child. I think our kids need to see much more of that, and we have to remind ourselves that we are more than what the media may be pushing at this time. So again, First Amendment is fine, but I think it has had a negative impact on children in particular.
Cheryl, that is what I said.
You're agreeing.
I'm agreeing.
You're
Okay.
agreeing with me.
All right. You said all right.
Anything that, a child becomes an adult. I mean, we were once children, so,
Right.
and what we see as a child, it impacts our, education, our purpose in life, where we're going, how we grow, and how we're stymied at that moment in time. So it is a negative situation.
Right, okay.
So who would like to be the first question, the first person?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. I was trying to be nice. I disagree with them.
By all means.
I disagree.
I knew Paul was waiting.
I was trying to let it go. See, I think one of the errors that we make, one of the large errors that we make, is by looking at things and just lumping everything together. I think anytime we make that, anytime we do something like that, we're just prone to error, and we've set ourselves up for error. So your question is a question about street lit. Well, I mean, in its very nature, it can't all be bad. It can't all be bad. You can't tell me that people would sit down and write and everything they write is just bad. Now, some of the writing is poor. I agree. I mean, really, really poor. And it's not the literature that I prefer. But unlike Tony, who came to literature, as he says, like with Richard Wright, I came to literature reading other stuff. I read Dirty Magazine. Those were favorites. I read comic books, I read all those kinds of things. And it wasn't until I was probably about 17 or 18 years old that I crossed James Baldwin. And then the pursuit continued on. But I read trash. I read all kinds of trash first. And they gave me a basis so that when I did cross Baldwin, so when I did cross Richard Wright, I could make a distinction, that this is something that different, this is something that appeals to me. One of the things that I would criticize, and I'm sorry that Adrian Ingram isn't here, but Adrian Ingram gave me a lesson years ago when we did the Walter Mosley book, and she said this, she said, you know, you black publishers are doing a great job getting the books out, and they're serious books and all like that, but y'all don't know what fun books are. And so I said, what are you talking about? What's a fun book? She said, that's my point. that's my point. We publish serious books. Everybody up here, Wade and Cheryl publish children's books, and they access people as they should on a lower level. The brother who is in jail is going to have a hard time, even though many of our readers are in jail and they read our books, but many of them don't understand, but they do understand Iceberg Slim. They do understand Relentless Aaron. They do understand some other things, and I'm all in favor of them having that access to that literature. Last point on this. You have to understand that publishing goes through phases. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was black nationalist literature. So literally anybody who wrote black nationalist literature, whether it was good, bad, or not, if it was anything that said black and had red, black, and green on it, you sell it. Okay, it was one of those things. Before that, it was something else, and before that, it was something else, and after that, it'll be something else. And the same is true of what we would call urban literature now. The sales are, as I talk to booksellers, the sales have gone south on this literature. So it's not something we should condemn. I think we need to celebrate and be thankful for the people that we have brought along as readers, and hopefully they'll continue their reading and be able to distinguish and make good choices as they develop. I heard people laugh when I said I read dirty literature. That means I got friends in the audience. Y'all know what dirty literature is. Thank y'all.
So who will be the first to ask the first question of the 10th anniversary of the Harlem Book Fair? The mic is there. There we are. Please.
My question is, if all you have publishing companies and then times get lean, have you ever thought of kind of doing a temporary merge?
Like a roll-up.
Yeah, like a reciprocal agreement of some sort that when things get better, you go back to your own ways, but have you ever considered that?
You know, that has been a discussion. I use the term roll-up because there is a brother who's a lawyer who proposed to us rolling up our companies some time ago. But that is a discussion that people have had. But look at this panel, and it's very, very interesting. This panel, for example, and it may not be true of other publishers, some of the urban publishers that you find, but if you look at this panel, you will see that this panel publishes out of a love and an interest. They publish out of passion. And it isn't necessarily a commercial passion. And if you roll these passions up together, you may not get a commercial package that's good enough that will be able to be unrolled later. Do you understand what I'm saying? For example, Kassahun Checole has published more than 1,000 titles on African history, always has his house mortgaged up, okay? Cheryl and Wade, who publish I don't know how many books on children, but they always have their house mortgaged up. My house we won't talk about. Tony, he always tells me he's successful. I always challenge him, but the commercial viability of these passions, these people are in it to bring information to our community, and rolling that up and trying to make it commercial has stymied us for some time, okay?
I think also
Question.
the kind of books that we publish is really varied. We, obviously, Just Us Books focuses on books for children. The only way I think that perhaps that can work is if we can some way find a source of money that we can sort of loan each other. But I agree with Paul that we cannot, come together because we all came at it from a different point too. And Just Us Books is it's my child, it's Cheryl's child. It's our third child, you know, and we cannot give up our child. You know, we've gave birth and nurtured and have helped that child to grow, and that child now is 20 years old. And I don't want to give it to Paul Coates.
I mean, that's true.
Yes.
I think it's a very good question, and I think there's future in it somewhere along the way. That's what I think. It's good.
Okay. Thank you for coming. I just want to ask whether genres that are more futuristic looking, like science fiction, fantasy, those types of stories, whether you come across authors that want to tell those types. Since I've heard you talk about historical and contemporary stories, I haven't heard so much about future.
See, again, you want to look at the panel that's up here. This is a panel, with the exception of Wade and Cheryl, that really doesn't do a lot of fiction. You see, you got a lot of nonfiction folks up here. And so even if those stories came to us, I'm not that interested in them because my passion is going back, getting old books, you know, bringing those books to the full, bringing those books to the front. However, I will say that there is a special edition of a Walter Mosley book that is all futuristic stories that will be published, that we will publish in a couple of years down the line. But that's because I'm stuck on Walter, not so much because I'm stuck on the futuristic stories.
Okay, thank you.
Then if I can piggyback on that, particularly as it applies to nonfiction and children's, as we look towards 21st century or more technological ways of advancing these types of titles to the greater African American diaspora, can you all address the use of e-books and particularly audiobooks as a viability for those people who either don't have time to read, can't read while they're driving on the New Jersey Turnpike, who still want to listen or who want to be engaged in children's books, with audio being as a component with the book, or with other titles that are 40, 50, 60 years old that are being reprinted, and you may want to use audio books or things of that nature as an alternative for those people who don't have time or who aren't interested in the tactile turning of pages and things of that nature. Thank you.
Half of our books are available as ebooks at www.amberbooks.com. So we try, you know, that's something they sell for $5. So that's a future. We're now in the future of that at Amber Communications.
With children's books, I think it's a viable option. We have not done audiobooks per se. We will be working in that field. We have some e-books available through Amazon and
Yeah, we've licensed the rights.
Licensed, yes, so those are options, definitely.
I think there's been more licensing to someone like Amazon.com who is doing the Kindle book, for example. Most of us, however, would need to study what that means. I mean, it's a new technology. The revenue stream of it, the technical aspect of it is not easy to understand to a book publisher as easily as it is to someone else. So it's a learning curve that has to follow up and then jump into it. But I think it is natural. We will move on into audio and e-books as time progresses.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We get a lot of requests from companies that do electronic books. As I said, we've sold rights for several of our books, but also for audio books. And we sell a lot of books to the library market, and that's what they want. That's what they want. So you're right, and we need to really look more toward producing in those fields ourselves, or those areas.
I'd like to know what you all have done in the past in terms of marketing to colleges and universities. I happen to be a professor at Norfolk State University, and I teach African American history. And I have seen some of the things that we get as faculty in terms of things that come in the mail, and sometimes email. But I am concerned because as I listen to some of your companies, I don't recall seeing some things from you, and I just wondered what, if anything, have you done in terms of marketing not only those schools, but predominantly white institutions as well. And there are a number of organizations such as the National Association of African American Honors Programs. And when we have our conferences each year, there are opportunities for those types of things to happen. So I just dropped that and let you respond to that, but also say that I think that's something that you might want to look at. Thank you.
I think that's a very good point, because all of us need to make an effort to reach out, particularly in my field, in the academic world, to reach out to the academic community. It's a huge community, both in the school system and the library system. In our case, what we do is we go to our specialized conferences. In our case, we go to 32 conferences every year, non-failing. These are academic conferences that we go every year for the last 25 years. And it does pay off because faculty does recognize the books, they use them in class, they spread the word in many ways. However, there is a second problem associated with money. We don't have the financial wherewithal for us to be able to send free books to faculty members or to do marketing, as you know very well. It is an expensive endeavor. Even to have a salesman or saleswoman go out to universities and show our books. That is the problem we face of our short pockets, but not because we don't know that it should be done and could be done. Once the finances are there, definitely we need to move to that. But conferences, we cannot fail to do. They're very critical to identify those conferences that are vital for our field of area of work. Absolutely. And go there every year.
Yes, similar to Kassahun, because we'd be in a similar situation. A lot of our books are used, particularly by people who are doing black studies and African American studies. So it depends on our budget. Sometimes we're going to do more conferences, sometimes we're going to do more mailings. We absolutely are going to reach out to African American Studies librarians. We're going to reach out to African American Studies departments. One of the things, and we will send out review copies to those who request them. One of the large problems with reaching the workers, the actual folks who are teaching these core classes, is that you have constant movement. You have some people who are perhaps adjunct, and oftentimes in departments they form larger numbers than the tenured faculty. And so you're really aiming for a moving target. Mm-hmm. Conferences then become the best way of dealing with them, and there are limitations to those, but that is some of the stuff that we do, and regular mailings, are supported.
Yeah, we always search for every library in the country, whether it's a prison library, college library, university, it doesn't matter, a library anywhere is a library, and libraries are great places to sell our products to, and we want to sell as many as we can to as many libraries as we can, so thank you.
If I might add, coming talking to some of the fiction writers, one of the things I found out too is there's been a movement recently, I think within the last 5 or 6 years, where black authors and so on have gone to some of the retail stores that they have on some of the bases, the Army bases, etc., and a lot of them who have visited us on campus for Black History Month activities, etc., talk about how they have increased their sales that way because they are getting in contact with the military people through Army wives, Navy wives, and through the men and women in the services to that class.
Yeah. That is a really tremendous market. We discovered that market early on, and we sold a lot of books to PXs and to the military market. But it is a huge, huge market that is often overlooked. And it's a worldwide market.
I'm going to ask request that as you make your question, you stand at the mic until the question is answered. Just in case you have a response, we want to hear your response to that, but at the mic. Please.
First, let me say congratulations and thanks for the critically important product that each of your companies produces. And I have two questions. The first related to the publication of photography books. What are some of the particular issues that relate to bringing publications related to our culture, history and religion from a photographic point of view? And secondly, are there opportunities for a global strategy where we outside the publishing industry can help you create a greater awareness of what you do, such that as more public awareness exists, all will benefit in terms of the publications of works by Black authors?
If I could address the point about photographic books, I think it's a wonderful idea. Chester Higgins Jr. has published beautiful books on the diaspora, the African American experience, Africans all around the world. Many of his books are, and they are award-winning books, and he is an award-winning New York Times photographer. The question is, again, many books are out of print. How do you bring those books? These are coffee table books. These are books that are very expensive. Paper is tremendously expensive and has a limited market in terms of being a coffee table book because of the price point. You can't really produce a book of photographs for $1. You know, there's a lot of money involved in it. I think there are ways that you as the reader can help us, and it goes back to each one teach one, each one reach one. We have to really educate ourselves about publishing and know that it's a business and it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of resources, and advertising and access are, again, the things that make you know that there's a best-selling book on the New York Times best-selling list, because those publishers can pay for the ads and the ad space and the space in the bookstores. So as a community dealing with access on the internet, we can do things with networking with groups, each one teaching one, spreading the word to your neighbor, to your resource people. And it's word of mouth largely that Just Us Books has made an impact in children's publishing. Our books were initially sold on the street, and people said, did you see this book? You got to have this book for your child. So that personal contact makes a difference in terms of building readership, and we really have to build our readership and our support for each other economically.
There is a positive news for picture books in a way, because the technology is in our favor lately. The digital technology has brought the point of producing picture books to a level that is achievable or possible. My recent experience, we just published a book by an urban artist called Mr. Malloy, who's a 93-year-old artist in Trenton, New Jersey, and it's a full-color book, and we were able to manage to publish only 500 copies at a reasonable price to make a little bit of money out of it. It's not, so the price point became critically important for us to take it on. So I think there is a potential now with the digital technology to do something better, more with picture books.
Right. Yeah, just quickly, we've actually published a couple of books where we've used photographs rather than illustrations, and those books are doing well. So whatever we feel works well with the text, we'll try, so we're not just wedded only to illustration. We have used photography. In fact, our son is a photographer.
So how does the audience find your books? And I don't mean at the bookstore. I mean, I don't know how many in the audience are familiar with Africa World Press, or Just Us Books, or Black Classic Press, or Amber Books. How do we brand in such a way that the audience is as familiar with your work as they are with the majors? And I know that that's a resource issue. And we play around the resource.
I was trying to figure out how to get this in because, we talk about 40 years of black publishing. One of the major ways that appeared over the last 10 years has been the Black Book Review Journal. And so I'd like to just ask if you could give us a comment on the state of Black Book Review journals, because they've been a critical source for getting the word out. And really, the appearance of the Black Book Review journals, there was never anything like them before in our history of publishing, and I don't know what we will have after them. Can you help us by telling us and sharing with the audience that? I wanted to ask you a question, Max.
I knew I shouldn't have asked that question. We too are impacted by market forces, especially the price of production and printing and just the general overhead that falls in line with that, given that the book review reader is a small segment of the African American reading market. Part of our responsibility is to find ways to make ourselves more present, and also to find a balance between books which we know are popular and commercial and those books that we would like them to know about, such as the books that you bring to print. There is a movement to marry the information with technology. So a lot of our work, in fact, through QBR, the Black Book Review, is moving online. Both online and through video content and blogs and web radio, and just being very aggressive in not being so much at the effect of technology, but creating and bringing the market into the leading edge of technology. So that's, and I understand, we have so few ways to get the information out. In fact, I think part of the book fair's success is based on it being not just a celebration, but access to information that we otherwise may not have access to.
Yeah, I think Max is absolutely right. Everything is going online. We lost a great journal in Black Issues Book Review, which a lot of us, well, I was weaned on it through my 10 years in the business because it came out in '99, and we depended on that. We advertised in it. We got editorials on it, and it was a live situation, meaning not on the internet. It was sold in stores, and it was a live magazine that you could read. But with blogs and cyberspace, everything that can be done, I think it's teaching the reader, our African American reader, to go more online and see our presence. www.amberbooks.com was established in 1999. So we've been at this a while. We've been on the website and understanding cyberspace and selling, not as a play toy. To me, it was always everything to do with the internet is a business to me. It's not a toy to me. It's a business to make money. Serious money could be made on it, utilized right. And so that's how I see it. And the QBR is wonderful. AALBC and our websites are all turning. All of our websites are turning into more or less journals, and with our information on it. And we go to your QBR.com, www.qbr.com, and there you can read about all that we're doing, all the books that are available, all the information on the African American world and of literature is there, and ALBC and mosaicbooks.com, and goodness gracious, there's so many of them that you can get information from, because information is what we're all after. The best books to read. Why do you want this self-help book or this book or a children's book or a reissued book by W.Paul Coates or a globalization Pan-African book by Kassahun? And you want the information on where you can get the best of what you want to read and what you need for yourself and your information that you need. So it's an all-encompassing situation. The internet and cyberspace it's a wonderful world. You don't use it well. It's all there.
We mentioned this earlier. What then, if urban books is moving through its phase, what do you see as the next? Here's an opportunity for you to share your vision with us. And following that, what would you like to see next in the world of Black book publishing? What's the missing? What's the I would like to see? It's our closing question.
Okay, I'll do it. Fine. Max, this is foundational. 40 years, in many ways, this phase of publishing is done. Okay, the fact that we're sitting here having a conversation, talking about whether we're talking about digitizing books, whether we're talking about audio books, whether we're talking about people having access to Kindle and what have you. I'm not saying that Tony's going to go away, I'm going to go away, or what have you, but we have to be talking about new phases, and we have to be talking about marrying of technology. And that is, it doesn't mean that the writing is going to go away, and it doesn't mean that writing will ever change. It'll always be, I would hope, to be more beautiful. But certainly we've entered a phase now where people can carry in the palm of their hand a library that they never would have been able to get into their bedroom. You know, they can carry it in the palm of their hand. Their access to it, their ability to have that text interconnected with other sources of information. So if you're reading about the Zambezi, touching the word to the Zambezi carries you to a video presentation or an audio presentation in which you're further connected to the people. All of it's about information. All of it's about the multiplication of information, whether we're dealing with children's books, whether we're dealing with fantasy, whether we're dealing with Mother Africa, makes no difference. Whether we're dealing with Tony's books on improvement and health and wellness and getting rich and things like that. You know? The ability to take that information and connect with that information and carry it into other sources in which it multiplies and enables us to empower ourselves as a people is what I fully expect that we will be talking about in the next 10 years.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm sorry, we are out of time.
Sure.
So we will continue the conversation through the work that we do. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And Max Rodriguez, who is the moderator of that panel, is the founder of the Harlem Book Fair, which is celebrating 10 years this year, and he's also publisher of QBR, the Black Book Review. You're looking at live shots of 135th Street in New York City. The Harlem Book Fair is going on. It's between 5th and 7th Avenues. You can see lots of booths down there with booksellers and publishers. The C-SPAN bus is also up there, and it's parked on Malcolm X Boulevard between 135th and 136th. So if you happen to be in New York City, stop by, visit the bus, pick up a book bag. Book TV will be live all afternoon with the Harlem Book Fair. And coming up next is a panel on James Baldwin's literary legacy. It's going to be moderated by Herb Boyd. He's the author of Baldwin's Harlem, a biography of James Baldwin. He's going to be joined by Quincy Troop, Amiri Baraka, S. Pearl Sharp, and Cora Daniels. Cora Daniels, of course, with Essence Magazine, and the author of Ghetto Nation. That's going to begin in about 10 to 15 minutes from now. Coming up this afternoon, other panels include an interview with Beverly Manley, former wife of Michael Manley, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and a Jamaica broadcaster in her own right. Look at the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade to the U.S. It's the bicentennial of that abolition. Mississippi Freedom Riders is another panel that's coming up, and State of Civil Rights. Those are some of the things that we'll be doing this afternoon at the Harlem Book Festival. All the events are taking place at the Schomberg Center in the Langston Hughes Auditorium. That's on Malcolm X Boulevard at the corner of 135th Street. So, coming up in just a few minutes, James Baldwin's literary legacy. We'll be right back with live coverage of Harlem Book Fair.
We're in Washington, D.C. at the 2008 Conservative Political Action Committee meeting with Marcus Luttrell. He's the author of Lone Survivor, the eyewitness account of Operation Red Wing and the Lost Heroes of SEAL Team